In order, it's 4:34, 35. First order of business is approve the minutes for the October meeting. Anybody have any?
I move that we approve the minutes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. And now, you folks can give us the update on the teacher leadership program.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having us here today. We kind of want to talk to you, we want to do three things. Kind of give you a brief overview of the teacher leadership program, a couple results pieces, just a little idea of what it is. Then we want to do a deeper dive into the program. We have Sharon, Terry, and Jay here from our pre-K programs. And sort of talk about some of the results they've gotten, and really the journey of how they've gotten here. And then after each of these sessions, sections, we'll have a little time to talk about things and answer any questions we have. And then at the end, we're hoping, because we're educators, that we have the ability to transfer some of those knowledge. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do today with y'all. So we have a learning objective. We're hoping that after we leave today, we'll all have a deeper understanding of how sustained change and growth happens for teachers in our district. With the idea that, whenever we're planning to go forward, we have that as a way, like things we know we can leverage in our district, which will allow us to do the things that we want to do. So what we'll do is, this is the path we'll take today. I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of ranking, a little ranking activity early on. Give you some brief overview of the program. Talk about 2 different expeditions into the wilderness with pre-K. Come back and talk about that a little bit and do some sharing. Before we do that, I was raised by wolves, so I never do introductions about anything. People know each other well enough here.
We'll make friends.
We'll make friends. That's fantastic. Okay, in that case, I'm going to have to do the same thing I often ask new administrators to do in the district. If you could just take a moment and individually, like, these are 5 things, just kind of, they're not the full encompassing things that you have to do. But if you wanted to, like, be part of a lasting legacy, these 5 things, can you rank them in order of what you think would give you the greatest long-term impact? Just write it on a piece of paper and a notepad. Then ask you to share some. So in that case, does anyone want to share some of their ideas on this? How we prioritize these? What are their thinking behind trying to do these things?
I put continuous growth and adaptation at the top.
So did I.
So did I. Make that 4.
What's that?
Make that 4.
Because what's some of the thinking behind it?
I think the key word there is, well, key words, I guess, of growth and adaptation is this stuff is always changing. Our student needs are always changing, so I think when we have to deliver to them, always has to be changing too.
And that piece for me helps every single other one of those. That's kind of a key point for me, is that teachers really do a lot of that other stuff as well. So making sure they have the tools and training they need.
Yeah, these other things are always changing too.
One of my favorite leadership people we work with through the principals, and first summer review principals talks about, if you want to see your school improve, there's 2 ways you can do that. You can hire better teachers or improve the ones you have. And so I think that teacher growth is, fundamentally important to what we do. You know, helping the teachers be the best they can is the best way we have to ensure student success.
Yeah. You're about to see some bad slide animation. Look, here's the same slide. Here's the same slide. Okay. Well, one thing I always talk to you about though is, I'm with you. I also think all those things are very fundamental to, I mean, if any of those things are missing, you have a badly run system. What I was talking to administrators about is that 4 of those 5 things are things that if they're not insured, people are immediately in your face. They're totally noticeable. They're totally noticeable to people. And people come and hound you about them until you correct them. And the one in blue is the one that no one's ever going to come and bother you about. Like, as a principal, you're almost never going to get a teacher saying, you know, what are you doing to ensure my continuous growth? You're not going to get community members coming to you for that. So unless you have a really strong focus on this, it's pretty natural that you're going to default to spending most of your time and energy on the other 4 and very little energy on this one. That's kind of essential to your needs. And that's kind of where I sort of see our program, it's bad animation, sort of fitting in. So just a little bit about us. You know, as a program, there are 300 plus stipend level positions. These are people who teach their full day, and then they have a small amount of money to serve on their buildings instructional leadership team or on a cultural efficiency team that our district has. And then there's roughly this many release time positions when you look at curriculum coordinators and these instructional design strategists. And these are usually part-time and full-time release positions. Some of the instructional design strategists are building-based. Some are, a very small number are focused on innovation. There are some for special ed, and there are some that serve the roughly 100 to 110 teachers in any given year that are in years 1 or 2 of their careers in our district. And then we really see this program as the one that partners with administrators in our district to ensure continual teacher growth. And I think that's something that both administrators have in common, we have in common as teachers. And I think it's a collective responsibility. So it's teachers' responsibilities to grow. It's the teacher leadership program to partner with that. It's administrators' job to provide the support and also the vision for where that's going. And sitting in the middle of this whole thing is professional development, which would be theoretically aligned around our learning targets for teachers. I think frequently we sort of look at professional development, we get rid of all the other stuff and think we're going to get changed. But as we'll see tonight, sometimes there's evidence to say that's not true. So this is one of my favorite graphs. I just want to talk a little bit before I kick it over to our preschool folks. This is Brightbyte data, which comes from the Clarity Survey. This is just one measurement that we look at, sort of talk about, you know, our teachers using technology in a certain way. And these are 3 elementary schools in our district over 3 years where this was somewhat of a focus of the administration. And you can see that over on the right-hand side are the number of people that never do this practice, and over on the far left are the people that have made this part of their regular practice. You can see that over a 3-year period, despite an intent to make this change, virtually nothing happened in those 3 schools. Demographically very similar schools with our innovation IDS in them over a 3-year period. So this is the first time we start to see weekly adoption of practice. And in places where on the far right-hand side you get dropped, and school B is the one where I know that we had the most close alignment between the administrator really making this a priority and the coaches kind of coming behind it, and the building-based coaches that were doing the support too. And that's when we really see the biggest transformation, the number of people that are no longer doing this thing. So this is one piece. So before we go any further, any initial questions about setup stuff before we dive more deeply into one program's journey?
Are you trying to say you're the greatest of all time?
No, this is just curiosity.
Oh, I didn't know. I was like, wow.
You know, the goat has really changed. It's you know, when I was young, the goat
It was a
was
bad thing.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was terrible
right?
to be a goat. It's only recently, and I haven't changed with the times. So for me, a goat is still sort of a. But I do love them.
I guess just to throw out a question, and maybe it'll sort of get covered as we go through the rest of this. But I just wonder how consistently it's, teacher leadership is applied around the district and, how to, because I assume some places do it really well and some don't do it as well, and how do you leverage that, find out what does work and what doesn't work, and it kind of can be localized and help each other there, but how does that get bigger and make sure that we're casting that wide net, so.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, kind of what I hope we take on tonight, because I think there are, we have to start looking at this program and think about exactly that. Where are we getting results? What are the things that are happening in those places that get results? And how to make that stuff happen more consistently across our district.
I have a really boring question. Is this 100% funded by categorical funding?
Yes.
Okay, so no general fund?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been told very specifically by Craig, never ever get into the general.
Yeah, okay. And the 80+ positions, how many of those positions are full-time, only teacher leadership?
I don't have the exact number in my head, I think it's about 43.
43?
Yeah. And one of the things one point we always make budget-wise is that in a lot of ways this program helps the general fund, because you have a lot of teachers in this program who are towards the high end of the salary scale. So we sort of this program has taken those off the general fund, is paying for them categorically. So some people have the misconception if we just got rid of this money, we would have a lot more, but what the general fund would have to do is reabsorb teacher salaries from this program.
So the release time positions are partially funded by the district and partially funded, they're like split in half or something?
It depends on who you are. So if you're sort of a general teacher out of a core, like core instruction, then you're partly in general fund, partly out of teacher leadership. If you're a special ed person, then you're out of special teacher. I have two funds of categorical funding.
But if you're 100% only teacher leadership, that's all you do, then you're categorical funding.
Yes.
To kind of follow up on that, both to your question, Lori, and to Sean's a little bit, when we initially did our proposal 5 or 6 years ago, we were doing some of these teacher leadership things, we just were calling them differently, so we were in a pretty good spot. Because to Ben's point, we took positions that we were paying for out of the general fund, but fit within the framework that we had developed. And so Ben's right, there are ways where it does provide some relief to the general fund, because there are already things that we knew were best practice and good for our students, good for our teachers, and this provided us some flexibility to change that funding source a little bit.
20 elementary instructional coaches,
Yeah.
13 to 15 curriculum coordinators that were all funded by the general fund before that were able to slide over to this.
I have a problem with the model, the way it's been explained to me, and maybe it's been explained to me wrong. We take our most veteran, experienced teachers, the ones with the greatest skill, and we limit their access to students, but yet increase their access to other teachers. And the true apprenticeship model, and I'd love to bring a forge in here in 2 animals, is where you have the master demonstrating and the apprentice in the environment, and the apprentice watches. So to me, it seems the model should be our veteran teachers get maximum exposure to students. They're the best, they're the brightest, they're the ones that have the most experience. And the rookie teacher, or the less experienced teacher, the one we're looking to give the development to, observes in that environment. The master interact with the students and everything that way. As opposed to the master observing the inexperienced teacher trying to do things or helping them that way, instead of seeing the actual example being displayed in front of them. Am I wrong, or where am I off? Or is that a fair assessment of where we are right now?
Well, I think there are lots of different models of development, right? So if you look at this model really comes out of a lot of coaching in the medical field, coaching in the business field, even athletic coaching. You have a lot of times somebody who has a lot of experience in the area who's able to look at practitioners and help them sort of think about their practice, develop what they're doing. And so I think, what you're talking about is a kind of an aspect of, of this, which is you want to be able people to see models of quality instruction. That's a very important part of it, but the whole game isn't just watching and learning. It's sort of, because a lot of teaching is sort of how you think about your work with students. It's not a set of just discrete skills that you apply in a formula and it works for you. So I think what we try to do is we try to give kind of a broad range of experiences for people so that they can kind of think about their teaching. And some of that's models, a lot of that's a thought partner and
Sure.
how you think
Well,
about it.
with our policy right now, where we're trying to get our most veterans retired and off the books so we can hire someone less experienced and inexpensive. I'm concerned that when we are also limiting students' exposure to our best instructors, and I think that we should be maximizing our best instructors' time with students everywhere possible. That's my personal thoughts on it.
Feels to me like a capacity building. What we're trying to do here is build capacity, so that one master experienced teacher can actually coach and develop a whole bunch of teachers, building our capacity more quickly and more effectively. In the apprenticeship model, it's more of a one-on-one for a period of time, and so you're not going to develop as many more masterful teachers in this quicker time frame is what it feels like to me. So.
I would
Well, that's
also
my
argue that I don't know that
Sorry.
new teacher equals bad teacher either.
No, well, okay, true. I'm not gonna give that up, but 20-year vet as opposed to second-year teacher. It's a challenge. I'm always concerned when our years of experience walk out the door.
Can I offer you one thing that, this might be a total digression, but it's what I'm thinking of right now. It's an experience I had when I brought my car to, Dave Seidel,
Yes.
mechanic, yeah. And, I thought about how, I learned to repair my own brakes just by watching a YouTube video. I don't know if I'd want anyone just drive my car, I don't claim to be an expert, but like the basic skill stuff's available like that, right? I remember bringing my car in once to Dave, and like, I drive it in, he looks at it and he's like, it's this, this, and this. Like he looked at it from 10 feet away. He didn't open the hood at all, and knew exactly what the problem was. The valuable thing that Dave had, that no one else had, was the way he thought about these systems of cars, and his ability, I think, to sort of not just give people in the shop a discrete skill, but also how to think about these problems. And I think it's a combination of things, which is so critical.
I understand, and you're also talking to the owner who has multiple years of experience, and you didn't talk to his tech who he hired out of Kirkwood.
Oh, yeah. Want to hear about pre-K?
Yes, please.
The bill's starting to creep me out. So.
All right, we're moving on.
It's staring at my soul.
You just let me know when you want me to cook it.
So we just kind of wanted to highlight the impact that TLC and having instructional design strategists in our pre-K programs, the impact it's had. And we're focusing specifically on our implementation of early childhood PBIS. It's a little bit different system than K-12 PBIS. It all is related. But knowing that in early childhood we put a strong emphasis on social emotional development as one of our main areas that we focus on, along with the other areas of early academics. Kind of two expeditions, as we were calling them as we were playing. These are two different journeys. First one started in 2008 when the DE was adopting early childhood PBIS and trying to roll it out across districts across the state. So this was well before we had TLC, well before we had our instructional design strategists. And what happened was the DE put on trainings for people from districts across the state. In our district, there were 2 of us that went to the training. And then the expectation from the state was we went back to our districts, gave the training, gave the materials, and teachers were supposed to carry out the program. So that's what we did. We came back, we did 1 PB with teachers. That's all we had the capacity to do at that time. The training that we went to in Des Moines was 4 full days of training. We had to condense it kind of down into 1 day of training for teachers. And so we gave that training, we gave them a toolkit with all the materials in it that they can use to implement early childhood PBIS, and it was kind of a go forth and do. But because we didn't have any capacity outside of classroom teachers, we didn't have anybody going out to classrooms, following up with implementation, following up with materials, teaching them how to implement all the different strategies and all the different components of the program that we had asked them to be doing. They were just kind of left on their own to go and do it to the best of their ability. So because of that, it died. We originally had a rest in peace graphic up here. There were teachers that carried out bits and pieces of it along the way on their own, but as far as the full implementation and doing it with fidelity did not last across the district in our program, so it just kind of went away at that time. And so then we were approached by the DE and Grantwood AEA 2 years ago, and the Grantwood AEA had hired a consultant for early childhood PBIS, one that we had access to. The DE was putting together a whole new training program for people in the district to become trainers, and then a whole plan of how that gets carried out throughout the district in a more consistent manner, so we don't lose it because of lack of capacity. So for us, we tapped into the TLC for that. Because of the TLC, we have our 2 instructional design strategists, Terry and Sharon. They kind of split our programs east-west side for who they support. And so with the TLC and our instructional design strategists, when we started this second coming of early childhood PBIS, we were able to put all these other components in place that we weren't able to the first time. So we developed a leadership team that has the 3 of us, plus several teachers, some paraeducators from the classroom, a parent representative, and then our AEA consultant. We've been able to develop much more comprehensive professional development, not only provided in PDs on Thursdays, but through our professional learning communities. It's ongoing on a bi-weekly basis through that. There's classroom PD going on. We made a really conscious effort this time of bringing the paras into it because they're such a huge component of our preschool programs. So when these 2 are out in classrooms, they're not only working with the teachers, they're putting together these classroom teams that involve the teachers and the paras, so everybody's on the same page. Because of our work with TLC and with the Department of Ed, Terry and Sharon have gotten involved with practice-based coaching, which I'll touch a little bit more on later, but that's been a huge component of how they're coaching teachers in the classroom. So having all this together has led us to more teacher and para buy-in, so everybody across the district in our 18 programs, they're all carrying this out now, they're all implementing it in their classrooms. We've built the capacity, we're working close to fidelity. We were told when we started this, it's a 3 to 5 year process. We're about 1.5 years in, but getting really close to our fidelity in a lot of classrooms. And then the ultimate goal of all this is that we're seeing improved student achievement, and then also that family component, their awareness of it, their buy-in to it, their understanding of the importance of it. So really we've seen a huge change in what we've been able to do with this whole program, kind of pre-TLC and IDS, and now that we have those components in place to help build that capacity in our classrooms.
So I'm Terry, and because I'm immersed in preschool all the time, I'm always thinking about how to make learning fun and engaging. And I know you've all had a long day, so I hope I've never read to a group of adults like this before. So now I'm rethinking my decision to make this book. And it's like, what was I thinking?
I like
Here we
story
go,
time.
Mr. Okay, Murley. well, here we go. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a story time preview here. So this is the expedition to peak performance and high impact learning in preschool. So improving teacher practice, the 2 tales, the tale at 2 attempts in preschool. So first we have the first expedition in 2008, as Jay mentioned, was without resources. There wasn't a vision, there were no clear expectations, and the hope of implementing teaching practices with fidelity was looking very bleak. So fast forward to 2017 in the fall, the second expedition began, and we started adding resources, coaching, PD, lots of opportunities for peers to teach peers, and classroom, like we have a lot of different teachers just volunteered for, I think, is it Phil? For something what Phil was talking about. Teachers would volunteer for other teachers to come in and observe them. So a lot of resources. We had a shared vision and ongoing nourishment, daily or weekly, whatever the teachers needed. So we drastically changed the landscape. Oops. So just to kind of summarize, missing resources was dried, cracked up foundation. There was minimal impact on teacher growth. With abundant resources and follow-up, there was great impact on growth. So how did the teachers grow? This is the data part that I want you to, Sharon's going to
Bring it
pass
to
out
a
a
more
little.
clear slide.
Yeah, so we have some clear handouts for you.
So I'll pass these out to you. So this is a slide that you'll have a handout here that is able to document the growth that we have made in the short time. The blue is our baseline, where we were in last February, and the red is where we are today. And so these are 14 different teaching practices. They are not specific to preschool. These evidence-based teaching practices can be applied to any grade level. They have to do with providing directions, how you plan for and intentionally deliver an appropriate transition, how you are, your structure, your routine of your classroom. For us, there are some things in there about teaching social emotional skills, just handling social problems, overall, wanting to teach social emotional skills and decrease challenging behavior. So you can see each of these practices has a designated number of indicators that we look for, and then the percent of indicators overall district-wide is the last bar here. And so we have a 13% growth in the number of indicators that are now in place compared to where we were in February. Some of our teachers made substantial growth. We had some that increased their scores by 50% or more just with one practice, and we'll kind of talk about how we did that. And so Terry will kind of continue with our story.
Can I ask, how do you measure performance against these indicators? Is it observation? Or
Sure. We have a tool that is called the Teaching Practices Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool, TPOT, TPOT, Teaching Pyramid Observation Tool. So it's about a 2.5-hour observation that we go into the classroom and we're watching for very specific things. We then go back and we score it. We had to go through a reliability training through the Department of Ed with the state to make sure that we are doing this consistently across classrooms. So then you're just watching for certain things, listening for certain things, documenting certain things that you then, it says score it a yes if these things are in place. Mhm.
And we make sure that, first of all, it was voluntary. And it just
Initially.
snowballed. And pretty soon, one teacher after another said, hey, I think I'd like to do that too. Because we made it really non-evaluative and a growth mindset, that this was something that was going to help your classroom. This was something that was going to help the whole team. So collectively, our teachers made 13% growth over a year. And individually, some of the data that we have collected, we can tie direct teaching and coaching time with the teacher to the level of growth that they made. For example, the teachers that made those 50% growth in one or more areas, those were the teachers that we spent the most time coaching. So, what are the contents in the backpack for this successful expedition that we're on? The first one, vision. We really had to clarify what is the vision and what do we want it to look like. And we didn't have to just clarify for the teachers, but the paraeducators, the principals, the support staff, everybody had to have this vision. And we had to all know and all have the same beliefs around that vision. Second, the skills. We all had to make sure that everybody had the skills. We had to make sure that the paras were trained. Some of the paras had never had any training in providing directions and or transitions. They just relied on the teacher. But when we look at it, best practice says that every adult in the classroom should be consistently providing the same level of support. The incentive is the kids. Teachers are finally seeing a big incentive because the problem behaviors are reducing, they're going down, and the incentive is watching the kids engage in purposeful, meaningful learning. And then resources. We had to have resources. Like Jay said, the first expedition, we didn't have any resources. This expedition, we have resources. So we have coaches to keep them on the path. We have support staff, para-educators help them carry the load. So it's not just one person. It's a team of people, and we're all on the path. And coaches, sometimes we are leading the path, but the majority of the team, we equal up who's carrying the load. And then the final and one of the important things is an action plan. Every single teaching team has an action plan, and some teaching teams have more than one action plan. Some teaching teams will have an individual or two that have self-identified an area in the teaching practices that they want to work on. And so then we'll coach an individual or a whole team. And the exciting part now is that the teams are starting to coach each other, and the paras are saying, oh, you know what? Hey, watch me. And they're actually using some video footage to support each other that way. So you can see the last couple of pages are blank because we are still on this journey and we're still learning, and we hope to write a chapter 2 next year. Thank you for indulging in my little story time.
One thing I want to add to what we really see is, you know, when we're thinking about resources in the program, we're thinking about the human beings that actually come to you and partner with you on what it is you're trying to do. And the one thing I know, I mean, Sharon and Terry and Jay have shown incredible growth in their program. When I look at, I'm able to look sort of across our coaching program and see who has the most intensive contact with teachers, and they're some of the leading people. I mean, in terms of how often they're talking with teachers in their classrooms, modeling practices, doing observations, they're really high up there in terms of numbers. So we know that when we put these resources in, it's a pretty clear, we start to get results of teacher practices. And the sad part is that we have this database that we're paying for, right, that sort of tracks student growth, and for whatever reason it's not working, but previously when it was, we were able to sort of pull out, you know, how student growth has changed as a result of the changes in practice of the teacher. So it's pretty exciting.
Chapter 2 will have that.
Yeah. but you called and they can't get their own system.
I think this chart's really cool as far as providing evidence for when, you know, you guys will oftentimes ask Amy and I, how do we know what's working or what's making an impact, right? Well, we know that research-based teaching practice improves student performance, and sometimes it's a little bit easier for us to isolate the variable on what the teaching practice is. And this, you know, shows evidence here, right? Here we know these are high leverage teaching practices with the research basis to support it, and if we're doing those more frequently, that we can relate to student success and results. I think that's where you're saying you haven't connected that data yet from the standpoint of the database, but those are actionable things for us where we can say we know this is going to impact our student performance in a positive way if we can commit to these practices.
And the amazing thing about what they've done is that, you know, we often will say, okay, so this is the formula, right? So we just need to go and make sure the teachers are doing this, so how are we going to force them to do it? And it's really sort of how you do it. So the way this team has done it is, this was entirely voluntary. This was based on the teachers' their desire to offer their students the best possible experience, and slowly adopting it. It only took about, 7 months for you to go from 0 teachers engaged in this practice of sort of self-reflection, the entire preschool teacher group sort of saying, this is what we're interested in doing. But there was no one forcing this group to do it.
So literally every teacher has voluntarily decided
Every
to.
single preschool,
Right.
18 preschool teachers are.
And due in part, I think, to the experience that they're receiving. And again, we had some, you know, positive deviance that we kind of got in early, and then, like Terry explained, they once they realized, wow, this is not evaluative, it's a strengths and needs kind of your self-assessment that, you know, the coach is supporting you with and your team, and that we would provide support for the entire team. And build that collaborative partnership, and that they could identify the specific practice that they felt for their particular classroom and give them the most reach. Make the action plan, we continue to support them. But just by identifying one practice, we find in this, we have teacher data, of course, for each classroom, for each team, but no matter what practice they identified, you know, they grew in many others too, so. And we're just, you know, we're just getting started with this, so it's, you know, there's just a lot of potential. But I think what's different with the way we're doing things, because of this cohort that we're involved with the Department of Ed and the structure that it has laid out for us, an opportunity, is that not only have we had the reach to many different teams, but we also have a way to document how the effects, you know, the data to show that.
I think that was powerful learning too, that it didn't really matter which practice the teacher, there wasn't a right answer. It just mattered that you were willing to, if you picked one, and you started to think about it and worked on it, that was gonna make a difference in your class, and was gonna sort that out. And I think, you know, I mean, I don't know of many other examples where in 7 months you go from 0 to.
Yeah, I was
0
gonna
to
say,
full.
that's, I've
Yeah.
never heard of that voluntarily,
Yeah.
no. So that's something.
And it's really about how they did it, not what they did. So, questions for this group?
You hit on mine around what are the student impacts, by addressing, that's the next step. 'Cause that would be super powerful.
Right, and we do have.
We could, so we use the goal assessment system that the state requires us to use. It was supposed to be a way to run comparative reports. So we could show kind of where kids were at, social emotional development last year before we were implementing all this across all our programs compared to our fall assessment on those kids. That report won't work for whatever reason on their
Their
end.
system is.
We called, they said, yeah, we can't get it to work either. That was their answer.
But we should.
So we're, hopefully,
Yeah.
that will get resolved and we can figure out a way to run those.
Yeah.
Because we really want to be able to see, you know, where we're at now with students compared to where they were, you know, the difference there. Not only, we'll be able to see this year where kids were at the beginning of the year compared to where they'll be at the end of the year, which will be some nice data to see too. But we
What
also
kind
want
of
to see
anecdotal stuff are you getting though from teacher, you know, what are they saying about student behavior?
Well, the biggest thing is the para-educators.
Okay,
And I know, JP, you'll understand, when a preschool teacher is in the classroom, most of our preschool teachers have dual endorsement, which means they're the special ed teacher and the gen ed teacher, so there's always at least 2 para-educators in the classroom. And so it's very challenging for all the adults to use the same consistent language and the same consistent routines. And so that has been the biggest impact. They're saying, oh my gosh, we're all in this together, and everything, that impacts the student. And that reduces the challenging behaviors because everybody has the same visuals, everybody's using, and it's just really working smoothly.
And there is data we're keeping on that, on challenging behavior specifically.
okay,
So teachers have a form, it's called the Behavior Incident Report. It's
Okay.
separate from what we use K-12 as far as behavior goes. But they're tracking those significant behaviors in the classroom. We kind of focus on physical aggression, self-injury, elopement as the main areas that we're looking at. So they're taking data on that now,
okay.
and we're working on compiling that throughout the year. So the expectation is we're going to see a drop in the number of those reports from September through the reports we're
So
seeing in
when you're
May.
compiling it, we're keeping it somewhere, like, trying to.
We're keeping it, we're trying to, right now, it's, the form was only in paper form,
Okay,
so the teachers have been filling them out. Now, we have a stack of reports that we have to input into a system, so
okay,
that's our next step.
okay.
And
So we'll have
again,
that data eventually.
and participating in this cohort through the Department of Ed, that was one of the requirements, is that we
Okay.
keep data on these behaviors, so.
DE's going to track that for us as well, so we'll send that data to them so they're able to see the
Okay.
impact as well.
But I think, yeah, the classroom teams are I heard somebody describe it as like magical. The other, like this, they just can't believe how quickly some of the kids have responded to some of this. So they're finding a lot of joy in their day. The teams are collaborating and working well together. When the kids are happier, the staff is happier.
And maybe vice versa too. I mean, so tracking, other than anecdotally, teachers' engagement, and
Exactly.
sense of satisfaction in their job, but then also one of the other outcomes you had shown on a previous slide was around family. I think how you described family
Yes.
engagement or involvement or something like that. Is there any way to get parents' input and what they're seeing throughout the
Yep,
process?
so we sent out a survey to parents previous to, right after conferences, because we share information about the program-wide PBIS with them prior to the beginning of the school year when teachers do their home visits. And then there was some additional information we share with them at conferences. So we sent out a survey, just a quick little survey that had some questions about as basic as, do you know that they're implementing this in your classroom? Questions as your teacher talked to you about these different aspects of social emotional development. If does your child have challenging behavior? If so, have you been involved in these different steps of the process around that? Get some feedback from them to see exactly where we were as far as their understanding of what was going on in the classroom, and then we can take that information, and our leadership team is kind of working on that. One of our big projects for this year is increasing that family engagement piece.
Yeah, that's great.
And with the data sheet too, kind of the first few practices really would be what we would consider tier 1 practices. And as those become more solid and consistent, we'll see fewer and fewer challenging behaviors. So that's kind of what's happening with the teams. We also received a grant from the foundation. It was a competitive grant and we used the money to purchase swivel systems so that we can do videotape recording of the teaching teams. The teacher can videotape themselves, the paras can videotape themselves, focused on one of these practices and with the 10 indicators, and go back and say, okay, did I do this, or how did it go? How did the kids respond? So that's been really powerful as well.
And sometimes the teaching team, I've got a couple teams right now where everybody is wearing an audio recorder on them during the same activity. So one team right now is working on transitions. And so everybody during that transition time, one person has to turn on the recorder and it records everything in the classroom, and then they can go back and do a self-assessment on what they were saying, what they were doing, and how it impacted the classroom.
Game
So-
film.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's really an amazing tool.
Does the DE require statewide voluntary preschool programs to do this?
No.
No.
No, we had
So-
to sign off on it and agree that we were going to do all these different components of it. So it's not a statewide requirement at all.
Are the districts around us also doing this?
I'm not sure how many districts are implementing it. A lot of districts are doing it. I don't know how many are implementing it in partnership with their ADA and with the DE. We are. And our community partners are also involved. We have our community partner programs,
Yeah, I wondered about that.
and so they're also involved in this as
I'm just
well.
thinking, as we go forward with some other things that we're working on, you all know what I'm talking about, whatever we can do to highlight how high quality our preschool programming is compared to our peers around us, hopefully we can get the community to come along with us and want to increase participation community-wide for all students, those of means and those also not of means. But if we can show we're providing a more research-based program, I think that's information that we want to share as we work on our other endeavors.
And we're getting, a little side note, we're getting highlighted by the Department of Ed. They sent a reporter a couple weeks ago down here. She spent half a day in a classroom, observing the classroom. She interviewed a teacher, she interviewed a parent about the program. Then we did a little,
Interviewed some kids.
interviewed some kids, which will be interesting.
Preschool kids, yeah.
Then we did a little lunch and learn at the ESC and invited our teachers to come to that so they could talk about their experiences with her. She came to our leadership meeting that day. So she's going to have an article up on the DD website sometime in the near future, kind of highlighting what we're doing here in Iowa City around this program. So pretty excited about that opportunity and getting that publicity.
And I do think the hard data about student performance, both in specifically PBIS behavior, but also in, all the other aspects of preschool learning, when you can get that, the student growth,
Right.
that's what's really gonna
Oh, yeah.
get people's attention.
I'm always concerned with sustainability and future growth, and you look at this chart and it looks great. And obviously, ideally, every one of the bars is at 100%, right? Everything's happening all the time. But as you make growth, it's easy when you start at a low level to make huge jumps, and then it gets harder and harder and harder as you're getting closer to the end. So I just kind of like to hear a little bit about, how you're kind of keeping the train rolling and getting even better. Because I assume we're not going to look at that and be like, "Yep, looks good." Right.
Well, as part of a motivation to keep those teachers, we're having a celebration / PD, professional development, down at Film Scene on Thursday afternoon. I know you're looking like, Film Scene donated the space. And we're viewing Mr. Rogers' Won't You Be My Neighbor? Because we've been talking about the social skills, and most of our teachers have not seen that film, and we have. And it's all about inclusion and social skills. And we think that it's really beneficial, and it's exactly what we're talking about. So there'll be some follow-up discussion, but we're having a little powwow and sweater up, and we're tying this to their growth and the practices. So one teacher said, "Oh my gosh, I almost didn't even open that link because I thought, oh, another PD right before break." And then I saw it and I said, "This is gonna be the best PD ever." So that's our motivation, to keep them going too.
But I think to answer a little more of your question too about how we'll sustain this. So, when we have new teachers, first, second year teachers, we're spending more time with them, as well as, celebrating with the teams that are moving forward. I mean, some of my teachers are like at a 98%, and so, I'm not spending as much time with them, but they are becoming leaders in their PLC groups. We're having groups work together and say, "Hey, how are you getting, your kids to do this, or do you have ideas for this?" We've set up a Padlet with the 14 different teaching practices, and it's just a sharing tool where the teachers can collaborate together, so that's helping kind of sustain this growth. So they can look and say, okay, providing directions, or providing that specific positive praise. How are people doing it? I need some new ideas. So they can get on that, and we have little videos on there. We have pictures of the classroom, materials, links to things people have shared. So that's kind of one way they're actually kind of helping each other.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in celebrating wins. I think to Lori's point, connecting, the wins here to the wins that the students are seeing, right, is I think going to say, all right, that actually worked. So what else can I do to make it work better? So I think that's a great way to do it.
I think a lot of it has to do with the culture you create around continuous growth. One of the fascinating things about education is because your environment's always changing, and it is one of those professions where you never actually get there, but you have to be willing to constantly grow and adapt and change.
And
I think that
I think we've kind of created a culture too with what we've done. So that any new hire coming in, a new paraprofessional, it's just, here's the expectation. Here is what we do in our preschool classrooms. Here are the expectations. Here are the indicators. This is what's expected. And it's modeled for them, by the staff that are already there. Terry and I oftentimes will model. The teacher might ask us to come in. But yeah, we really feel like we are reaching, I am reaching hundreds of kids and adults through what I'm doing versus just being in my own classroom environment with one class.
I think you're right with the word culture, right? Because it goes from a point of this is more work to this is the work.
Yeah.
Right. And if everybody thinks it's just more work, it's always more work. It's not.
Well, and they see it working. They see it being effective. So
Yeah.
that's the
But then
motivator.
it becomes this is the work, and that's the
Exactly.
culture, and it's not more. It just is different.
Right, and we've been able to look at our data and plan professional learning around specific things that we were lower in last year with the teachers and the paras, and you know, that's showing growth too then.
And I think it speaks a lot to the difference between, you know, a culture of compliance versus a culture of commitment. And you don't get a culture of commitment without behaving towards each other in different ways. I think that's really a testament to what they've done is, you know, they could have gotten in here and told people they had to do this stuff, and I think we would have been exactly where we were 7 months ago.
You wouldn't have had a lot of people volunteering for that.
That's for sure.
No.
Yeah.
We would have had a lot of minimal, how do I do this?
Yeah, how do I check the box?
How do, yeah.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Thank you. It's actually been really fun and motivating and.
Yes.
I do need to
It's
tell
the teacher's
them
work.
one more thing.
Okay.
Then we'll stop. We can call it now. We get so excited.
The baby goes less scary.
Yeah. Our teachers see this commitment and see this as so valuable that many of them now have something new on their vision. They want to go to Florida. Sharon and I were chosen by the Department of Ed last year. They gave us a $1,000 stipend, sent us to international and national training sessions in Florida. And this year, the state had $10,000 to give away and 10 stipends, and 5 of them were from our Iowa City Free School.
Wow.
Through a blind.
Yeah, a blind thing, and they got done and they said, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Iowa City is taking up half of the rest of the state is gonna be mad. Iowa City is getting $5,000, so teachers and even a para-educator gets to go. So
Wow.
she feels super valuable,
Yeah.
and everybody feels valued. And so I have 2 other teams that said, well, we're gonna work on our diets and our bikinis. We're going next year, we are gonna do that. So, yeah.
That's great.
So they're really motivated to work on their practices.
Well, that's gonna be part of the sustainability too.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, right, that buy-in, the culture
Yeah.
change.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, when you think about paras getting excited, I mean, that's a super high turnover position.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a critical
Yeah.
position and hard to, sometimes it's hard to, we haven't always provided great training or much training for paras. So to get them motivated, I mean, that's really creating those teams. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Thank you for the opportunity to
Yeah, thank you.
have us come and share.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think that's where that whole matter, checking that fact.
So this has been done in pre-K, are we
Yeah,
gonna
so
take
what's
this
the-
kind of coaching
what's the
approach
next-
Well, so the coach,
into
I think that's,
other grades?
well, I think that's what, you know, to Sean's point, I mean, we have coaches sort of across the buildings. And so, you know, we see the same type of growth, like when we actually track mentoring logs and code mentoring logs. We see, I mean, you can actually see teachers shift, new teachers shift from, you know, the focus is behavior to the focus is instruction. And you can see that really happening in those logs. And then you sort of start thinking about, you know, as we sort of move this up, we have building-based coaches in every elementary school in the district. We have the same in all of our secondary schools. And then it really goes back to what Sean was saying, is like, how do we sort of take what we know works the best of all those places? Because we have sort of, you know, the consistency of how we're, you know, what those people are spending their time doing all the time, or where their focus has been. You know, we see some inconsistent results because we don't have consistent, you know, focus and approach.
So how do we get there? I mean, I guess that's my question. The scale of this is smaller than like high schools.
Oh, yeah.
So how do we get to a place where we get this, but the buy-in here is so dramatic, right, in a short amount of time. So, and then that has been frequently my experience is it's sometimes hard to find the buy-in when you do PD. It feels like it's one more thing to do, one more meeting to go to, and so people aren't engaged. So I guess what's the plan to get from where we're at now to something that looks like this, K-12?
In 7 months.
7 months.
I'm sorry.
Well, I think part of the challenge is first we have to identify what those practices are that we want to commit to.
Okay.
And so I don't think that's just upon Ben, because his team's doing a lot of work already with coaching teachers through reflective practice and the high leverage practices they do know. I think for us, as we continue to build out our MTSS model and say these are the things we'd like to see happening in core instruction more frequently, then that's allows us to better center those coaches. But as you guys have hit on, you know, a big aspect of that is voluntary, you know, and that the coaches do try to make contact with a lot of different teachers, but they also try to go deep with teachers, and a lot of times that's on who's willing to work with them right now. And so for us, I think as we've seen success start to come from the TLC program, it's also allowed us to start to have conversations on how do we focus that work and how do we start to think about it, because you know, we were building it as we were doing it, type of work. And so I think now that we have a couple models of, hey, this is where we've been successful, that IDS innovation piece, when we see consistent long-term contact, we see movement, when we see buy-in from a whole group, we can see some movement really quickly. So those are the areas of success we'd like to start to replicate throughout.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, you know, it really is, it's not any one group that can make this happen in our, so when we talk about, you know, what's the target, that's not a target that the teacher leadership program is ever going to say. You know, it's not our job to set the target. I do know that, you know, when you look building by building, you know, people always have this, as a coach, your job is to be the unconditional partner for somebody on what they're working on. So, and everybody's at a very different place, so you have to be very adaptive in that way. People always wonder at this point, you know, well, what if you coach them on the wrong thing? And what if the teacher picks the wrong thing? And one of my top answers to that is when I've coached in buildings where the administrator has a very clear, articulated, consistent vision of what that building is about and what quality instruction looks at, I can't walk into a teacher's classroom and talk to them. If I say, what's really important for you to work on, what comes out of their mouth is what came out of their administrator's mouth for the last 3 months or 2 years. You know, so I think there's a really strong partnership here, and you know, all these people, all these roles play very valuable parts in developing this. So part of it is an ongoing conversation on what is the actual really important high priority target for us? How do we consistently talk about that in our district? And then when it goes to these, you know, teacher leadership roles, are we asking these roles to do the things that we know are most effective, which largely is high volume contact with teachers and being in classrooms. If that's what you're spending a lot of your time on as a coach, you're going to be seeing results with teachers. If you're spending time doing other things, by and large, you won't be getting those results. It's different between, like, are you doing work to maintain the system, or are you doing work to actually grow it?
Some of the question that I have is because there are, you know, a building-wide individual, right? Not all of our buildings are created equal, and somebody might have, you know, 12 classroom teachers in a building, and the other one might have 25, and trying to get those touches is a very different scenario, right? And I don't know how do we manage that, or have we noticed dramatic differences in the outcomes based on the facilities themselves?
Yeah, I mean, there's some differences. A lot of it's sort of how, you know, how buildings are set up and how they're using these roles right now. I mean, the way we, in some of those smaller buildings, they have half-time people. They're sharing half-time persons. There's some weighting based on staff. Thank you.
Yeah,
This is one of my
thanks.
great joys is coming and talking to you about this. And if you have questions that come up, please always feel free to email me or call me.
Great, thanks.
When that report goes out on the DE website, we should alert our own local media
Yeah.
to that and have them do a story about this program. Don't you think? Just
That would be
volunteer.
wonderful.
If you send us the link, I'll make sure that Amy gets full of it.
Nice and positive.
That's right.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No, honestly, I actually don't talk to her very often, but I would call her up personally to have her report on this program.
So, yes. We have, I think we have one agenda, one meeting in April that's open, where we don't have an agenda item for this committee. So,
Because we kind of fleshed out.
yeah, we fleshed out
Most of it, I think we've forgotten a month
Can
in
you
there.
remind me what the other agendas are for Jan?
I can't remember. We are.
April's full now.
April's full now? Yeah.
I thought it was, well, not full, but
There's one month.
we have ethnic studies update.
Okay.
It's in April.
It's February, the one that is open.
February.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
February's
Okay.
open.
Where is your email? So, January's promoting classes, how we promote classes.
Oh, right, uh-huh.
February is open.
Diane.
Ethnic studies in April and fine arts in May. So we have February. And Lori asked this question, I'm not sure I understand it. Somebody must have come to her about what do we do for kids with reading problems who are not IEP kids? And so I don't know.
I got some people kind of like title programming.
Well, that's what I wondered.
Well, I know she'd have a whole,
Yeah.
I don't want to volunteer for it since she's not here, but I know thered be a whole piece
Yeah.
around FAST and Eli and
Right.
early screening and, all
Reading
the stuff.
recovery,
Yeah.
one support.
So we-
Dyslexia. Had a parent come to me, and I think we should have a discussion on that and how that relates to our reading issues.
I mean, I guess that's why I feel like, well, what do we do for dyslexia? I mean, it's just, you take a reading assessment and where you score is going to qualify you for some sort of services, maybe not an IEP. And then I think also some of this is differentiation, or just in the classroom. So that's what Lori said. So it's a parent who, and so I just don't understand the question fully, because to me that sounds,
It comes, well,
it's very,
in the 3 years that I've been on, it comes before us at different times.
yeah.
In different ways. The fact that we don't test for it, correct, Steve? We don't test for dyslexia?
Well,
We would not use that diagnosis.
yeah, we don't diagnose.
Right.
Right. So what we're looking for is discrepancy and skill sets. If there are concerns about specific learning disabilities, that goes to the AEA. The AEA actually goes through that evaluation process. And then again, they're not diagnosing either. They're simply matching deficiencies in skill sets with specific, whether they're specific learning disabilities or if they're just generalized class instruction that requires differentiation. So we don't do medical diagnosis.
Right, correct. I think a discussion just informational for the community, because like I say, it does come up from time to time.
I mean, I'm sure we can spend a whole ed committee on reading. I mean, that to me
Right,
makes sense, like that's.
Well, I think if you get into reading, then the natural question is, so what if the kid is dyslexic? What's an intervention look like for that student?
Right.
And, we can talk through that.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we do specifically for reading, and we've changed things that we've done, so can we do that for February then?
Mhm.
Just reading? And have our folks come in and talk about that. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Sorry?
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So you do your business with data, so you do your business